Last time, in episode 6, we reassembled the transmission on our CRF 450X engine, including aligning the shift forks and shift drum. In this episode, we'll drop in the crankshaft and reassemble the cases, making sure nothing gets damaged along the way.
Alright, so now that we have the transmission installed, go ahead and just make sure we put the crankcase baffle in. That's an important part because it keeps the oil separation proper for the engine. All right, so now we can go ahead and install the crankshaft. ProX Racing Parts now offers complete crankshafts that drop in that include a ProX connecting rod. So now that the crank's in, the baffle's in, transmission's all ready to go and rotating freely, we can go ahead and get the dowels in and get the gasket on and get ready to put the cases together. Now when installing the dowels, I like to add just a little bit of lubrication to these, and that aids in disassembly down the line so that your cases don't, it's a lot more difficult for them to corrode or seize together, so it makes splitting the cases just that much easier. We can go ahead and take the center case gasket. That drops in. Now just be mindful that they keep the center section where the bore is with the gasket piece. So just be careful not to tear it yet, and that the rod can get in the way of that. So just be mindful of that up until we get the cases bolted together. All right, so because the oil pump is suspended on this other side case on the ignition side, it can make it a little bit difficult to keep the components together. So I oftentimes just use not a little bit of grease to help aid in keeping the oil pump in this side case. You can go ahead and wipe away the excess. And then while we're looking at this side as well, we'll add some of that same assembly lubricant to the main seal on the ignition side. And then when we go to drop this case on, we'll have to be careful of the direction of the lip on this seal, because when it has to come down across this edge, you want to make sure that the lip can't flip backwards, because this is a critical seal in keeping your crank and your engine cases separated and everything from pressurizing properly. All right, so we can go ahead and begin to drop the cases on, making sure that the gasket is on straight. So like when I was talking about the oil pump, the grease helps to keep it in there, but I like to keep a finger on it just to make sure it doesn't drop out while setting the cases together. All right, so we can go ahead and begin to drop the cases together. So at this point, we get to where the lip on the seal is starting to contact the crank. And I'll just gently push it out of the way if there's any caught edges. The lubrication helps a lot with this, but you definitely don't want to make sure not to damage that seal. So be gentle. All right, so now that the cases are together, we can go ahead and install the case bolts and get the cases buttoned up. I like to add just a little bit of assembly lube to the seal surfaces, just to keep it stiction and tearing at a minimum. All right, so in the disassembly video, we mentioned the little arrows on these Honda cases that mark where the copper washers are placed. So just being mindful of that, definitely need to make sure that those washers are there so that everything is sealed properly. And like this is one of the bolts with the copper washer, so making sure that that's installed there. So setting the cases back flat, we can go ahead and start threading in the hardware, being mindful to try to straighten the gasket if it is wanting to lift out off of any of the edges. You can go ahead and get them started, and I'll just start to not tighten them yet. We'll just bottom them out. And now that those are bottomed out, snug them up just a little bit. And before we can tighten this bolt in, we're going to go ahead and install the clutch actuator arm, and then the retaining bracket that goes there as well. Being careful with the seal, drop that into its bore. And then the actuator arm retainer registers on the small notch on the clutch arm. And then we can snug that bolt as well. So we'll come over here and get our torque wrench set to the spec for the case bolts. We'll go ahead and try to use a crisscross pattern. It's not going to click quite yet because I might go around a little bit. Snug it up a little more before I begin tightening. Make sure to refer to your owner's manual for any torque specs on any of the components, as this is just a reference based off of this engine. So then, now that we have those bolts tightened up, we can go back and reinstall the oil pump pickup. All right, so now that the cases are bolted together, I want to make sure that your oil pump still rotates and your transmission still rotates and has remained in gear. And then we can also make sure that the crank rotates smoothly. Now that the cases are bolted together, we can remove the bridge that separates the open bore of the cases for the gasket. All right, so now that the cases are together, we can go and take a razor blade and then where that bridge was connecting the gaskets on the base of where the base of the cylinder goes. Just go ahead and trim that. Make sure that the pieces don't fall into the case. Don't cut yourself. Just make sure it's smooth, just so that the base gasket on the cylinder has this nice, smooth mounting surface.